official mark. The official mark. All right. Well, me and Ginger can get we've got a cop out for that. Me and Ginger's got a cop out for that. In healthcare, every time you go in the room, you have to ask them what their name is. You have to identify them by their name and what's your birthday. And then, so usually I'll say, who's your great grandfather twice removed, or something else I'll throw in there at the end, and they'll look at me and I'll say, I hope you answer that before we do this. Now, let me find a couple quick things about some raiding here. I got a couple verses here I need somebody to read. All right, so Roger Cook, you hold on to Psalms 18:25. We'll give Robert Psalms 99:4 and 5. We'll give Chris Psalms 90. We'll give Tony Psalms 97:2. Let's see what else I have. Yours was 18:25. I have another one I have to find. I have marked on here. Just hold on to those because we'll need them. When I locate the other one, I'll give it to somebody. So, all right. So we'll start by asking the question of what did we cover last week? Okay. God will supply all your needs according to all your need according to his riches. Yeah, your need according to his riches. What else did we cover last week?
Walk circumspectly.
Okay.
Live mindfully.
Okay. Anything else?
Worrying.
Huh?
Worrying.
Worrying, yes, we did discuss about worrying. I spoke about the question decline. If you remember the question decline, can y'all remember what that was? Where that if you've got the young person between 2 and 4 years old, they ask approximately 200 to 300 questions a day.
Yeah.
And then as time progresses, those numbers decrease. What did we say the key thing was on asking is the key to what? Receiving. Okay. See, Ginger remembers something. Something she does remember. And we also talked about the Chicago Doomsday Clock. Y'all remember that? About the Chicago Doomsday Clock, and they rolled it back because they thought times were already bad enough before the clock would strike the midnight hour. And we started speaking about the fact of the walking circumspectly. What did we say that word meant? Okay. Mm-hmm. One thing that we also discussed was we're watching how carefully how we live, but we wanted to also say we're going to be vigilant and mindful of our behavior. But then the last part was the big one, that we're to be on the lookout. And what did I say was something that people should see us walking circumspectly? But what is one thing in that circumspectly walk? When you're circumspect, when you're in that walk, what did we say? There's one key thing that people should really pick up on. And what was that?
Please God.
Okay. What else? There was something we spoke about very hard, firmly last week about the fact there's something people should take notice and see that you're being vigilant about. And that was what? Huh? The times. And we spoke about how much of the times, well, let me back up. We extricated all the effort of thought of thinking that we're building a timeline that we've got to have all these things line up and get in line before we see any part of the end of time and return. And we removed all that probability because of one reason, and that one reason was the fact of what? Yeah, there's no man knoweth the day, nor the hour. Not even the angels can tell you when he's coming. But he is. That was the one thing about walking circumspectly that should really jump and get the attention, as I would call it, of people about us, is not as much that you try to do like some and dress a certain way, or you do like some and try to be a specific type of way. All those things we did study about the important part, but the one thing that I think that is the biggest lack is the amount of effort on people already looking for him to be here any minute. Now, you know, if you're anticipating someone to come, people pick up on that. If you're at home and you start prepping for company and you start dusting everything off and all that, you know, and you get into everything and you're starting to make preparations, people pick up on that. But there's one preparation we discussed, and one of the questions I asked you all last week was specifically about, are you ready? And if you remember, I took out salvation. For all those that are already saved, I took salvation out of that equation last Friday night on the are you ready, and said, now if you're already saved, then we've got that checked off. But I brought it to our attention about the fact of being ready. Are you ready to leave? Meaning that you're okay with leaving those that you know are not going to be there. Are you okay with being in the view of these people that are watching you and me and everybody else, and they're not going to go? And you know it. You know right now that he could return at any moment, and they're not ready. Most people that I know doesn't, and we talked about the plans of retiring and the plans of doing all this when you get retired and buying all this, whatever, at some point in time, and we make all them future plans. But the fact of the matter is that we're doing all that preparing for that with no preparing for him to come back. And the priority before he comes back is to ensure that we've got as many as we possibly know on the way. So after looking at the walking circumspectly in the world, we go to our next piece of the covenant tonight, and I'm going to leave these together because they all really tie with each other tonight. It says to be just in our dealings, faithful in our engagements, and exemplary in our deportment. Now, you think that one of the things that goes about the Bible, and I pulled this a little bit different tonight. I pulled Bible out that maybe people may or may not jump to and think about when they look at studying some things. And let me give you the first 3 verses that we're going to look at about being just in our dealings. So in Deuteronomy 24, in verse 10, it says, when thou doest lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. Thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou dost lend shall bring out the pledge abroad unto thee. And if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. So, in other words, in this part of Deuteronomy, the teaching is that if you lended your neighbor something, then you're not going into his house to get it. He's going to bring it to you. You are to wait outside. This is the commandment in this part of the to wait outside, and he's going to bring it to you himself. But then the Bible says that if he's poor, don't keep it overnight. If he's poor, don't you hang on to it. Most times in life, we think that we've been waiting for an opportunity, and we're going to look at this in a couple different ways tonight. How many times has someone upsetted you? And I've seen this happen a lot, that people borrow something or they loan them something, and then when that person don't bring it back and later upsets them, they bring it back up. They bring it back up. They remind them that you borrowed or I gave you whatever and you've never brought it back. And at that very moment, in that very point in time, critical time, of something that upsets us, that's what we act on and do, is we bring up a reminder to the point that you owe me. Or I loaned you this money and you haven't paid it back. You're coming back and asking me for more, but you never brought me what I gave you the first time. That's common practice. I see and hear that a lot around. And, we don't ever should be ever, well, let me back up. We should never be taken advantage of, first of all. But then we shouldn't take advantage of someone else. Here's how this being just kind of flips its coin on us. And I'll give you an example. I've seen people that have let someone borrow something or gave them something and loaned them something and then demand it back at a time that the person couldn't do it. And I have watched people, and I'll give you an easy example. I watched one time of a person that a family member loaned them some money. And here in a short while, whatever time frame, this person came back and asked for his money back that he let him borrow. And the person showed him that he had over half of it saved. And he said, I can give you that. The money I have saved, I'll give you over half of what I borrowed. He said, but I've got to keep this other part to pay my bills. And that man would not have it and made him give him all his money. So he got a cutoff notice for his electric. He got a cutoff notice on his water because he had no way to pay it, because the one that he borrowed from demanded full repayment. That is a reverse form of taking advantage of someone. I always go back to times in the Bible of the fact, this is one key thing, I always go back to times in the Bible. No matter what position we're in and how we choose to help people or what we do to help people, there's one thing that the Lord told them people, and Moses even recalled it in the Old Testament, and he always reminded the children of Israel that they were once slaves in Egypt. Don't forget where you come from. They were always reminded that they were once slaves in Egypt. So, first of all, being fair and just in all of our dealings comes first, with the first chip off. But then, let's jump on down to 2 more verses. Thou shalt not avenge nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. And the priest shall make an atonement for him with the ram of the trespass offering before the Lord for his sin which he hath done, and the sin which he hath done shall be forgiven him. Most of the ways that people treat us is what really makes us cry out to God for him to intervene. Most of the ways people treat us is what makes us call out to God to ask him to intervene. And what's interesting is that it most of the time might not even occur that way if we were the ones in their position. If we were the ones in their position, we might not be that in that manner how that goes. And if you ever think about this is kind of a way to look at gratitude and sympathy. But there has to be a point that God allows us to go through some things to know what others are going through. Have you ever heard people say, I know exactly what you're going through. I know exactly what that's like. I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been there. There's those points and ability of times that enable us to know. And that is a key factor in really knowing if you're going to have to, if you're into helping someone, you're going to know what that does to a person because you've done had it happen to you before. You've done felt that or been involved where you're at. Nobody comes into a job, I'll put it this way, nobody comes into a job, if you went to work at England's in Tazewell, nobody walks in there and becomes the CEO. Nobody walks in there and becomes the head plant manager today. There's a step process of working yourself up in your job when you go up into what you're doing. You can't never say, I've worked so hard to get where I am, and think that everybody else has to pass through that same process because they're in some type of situation. And that's what the world's getting to be when we look at the equal rights and the equal things that come about. You wouldn't believe how many workplaces right now have a problem, and they've created policies to where people can't just walk in the door and assume a position. They have to go through the equal process like every other person. And I'll tell you where that's coming from. So Roger and Rick's in here, and they worked over 300 years at Ford and Chevy. So let's just say they retired and after 90 days wanted to go back and pick back up and work. Some retirement systems let you do that. And so they have experience, 30 years experience. If they don't have a person to fill a job that these two have done and are qualified for, they should be able to go in and go into that position because they're qualified. They've done work there 30 years. Modern day people with equal rights says no. They start out at ground zero and go back through training, orientation, and start at the bottom. So then it puts everybody and everything behind. We get into a stuck position of where we go. All the time, you think about these processes that people get, that we get into the word accommodating. And what the definition of people, what we feel like we should accommodate is different for every case and situation that you look for. Let's look at another example tonight. Leviticus 19. Now here's one about dealing with just dealings. You shall do no unrighteousness in judgment, and metayard in weight or in measure. Just balances, just weights, a just ephah, and just hin shall you have. I am the Lord your God, which brought you out of the land of Egypt. There's another reminder of where that they came from. And I pulled this from a Bible reference that had a little statement in there about just dealings. And it says, in whatever we do or say, let us by all means be faithful and true, deceiving no man, beguiling no man to his damage, punctual to our word and promise, firm and constant to our just engagements, honest and fair in all our dealings. Last, not least, let us be sure that we not only propose to ourselves good and laudable ends, but that we also pursue them by no means, but what are just and pure. Those whose means are fair and spotless is what the end result comes to be in just dealings. Now, how often do you think that you have just dealings in your life? How often do you think you have just dealings with anything in your life? Okay. Okay. Anybody else got an answer they want to throw at me? How often do you think you got just dealings in their life? Huh? Okay. Okay. You go into the grocery store. Okay, I'm just gonna give you an example. You go up to the grocery store and you come up to the register to check out, and the cashier is just entirely rude. Horrible attitude, bad mouth, don't want to be there. They could care less that you're going to ask them a question. They don't want to answer it. They don't know anything about it, so they can't help you. Horrible. That immediately is going to get a response from us, is it not? It's immediately we're going to respond to it some way, good or bad. We're going to respond to that. When it comes right down to it, especially if we're going to ask a question. And that's where the line draws in our dealings and whether we're just. Now, what's the Bible say about dealing with a person that's being so arrogant toward you? Throw something easy. What's something easy you can think of the Bible says about dealing with people that are so arrogant about you? Turn the other cheek. That's a just dealing right there. Let's mark one off right there. A just dealing. Okay? There's several examples of dealing with people just okay, you're at work. You work a job. Roger and Robert's at work. Roger reaches over and slams that hammer down on Robert's thumb. Well, there has been.
Well, he's putting trusses on me, trying to kill me with the truss.
Well, that just swung around. It swung around or something, didn't it? Yeah. So that immediately in our human mind requires a response. So Roger might be entailing his mind of what he's going to do to get him back. It might be running through his mind. He might not say nothing, but it might be there. That's human nature, to get revenge, get back, even out with the situation. But immediately, any time that any situation arrives, this is what we call, in medical world, we call it readiness training, first receiver training, meaning that whatever you get and whatever you deal with, already be planned for it, have a managed plan of how you're going to deal with that. Well, the minute that anything comes in front of your door, especially if the devil's putting it in front of you, it's an immediate trigger for the human nature to want to get equal or revenge, whatever it may be. But the human mind, we are just wired that way, that we try our best. All in all, as a Christian, let me put it this way, as a Christian, what do we know about anger?
Anger and sin not.
Okay, so you can get mad. Roger can get mad, but he can't do nothing to Robert about it. Now, if the equipment failed and hit him, we can't do anything about that. But he can't be the one pulling the trigger. So right there immediately is dealings. See, the word dealings comes back into play. Every time you go to work and you don't like something at work and it aggravates you and gets you mad, it's human nature for us to want to go back to work and get even. I'll tell you a good example. How many people do you know, we've talked about this, how many people do you know that work a job and will do anything they can to milk the clock? Milk the clock. There's people at every job that will milk the clock, but they ain't doing no work. They'll stretch a lunch for a few minutes. They'll stretch a break a few minutes. Y'all seen that in the factories. They do it. Huh?
Punch in time.
Punch in time, a few minutes early, a few minutes late. Huh?
In that program, your starting time is 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
You're allowed 7 minutes after 8.
Yeah.
Before you have to punch in.
So they'd wait till 7 minutes after. Yeah. So that.
The one that's there couldn't leave till the other one punched
Clocked in. Mm-hmm.
Like a long close.
Yes. Oh yeah. So there's a mind game in our thoughts of saying, I'm not putting up with this. I'm not dealing with these people. It's just mine. This is a real mind here. What goes through with work, and especially when, and this is one of the big ones that a lot of people see now, is when people come in with no experience and they're getting treated and paid like the ones that's been there all this time that has all the experience, and they can't do the job. There's the point in time that triggers us to start seeking revenge. And that's where Rick's at with the milking the clock. They'll milk that 7 minutes before and after. They get paid the same, but they're guaranteed that 7 minutes, nobody make them do anything. When the other one's still having to do work for 7 minutes, he's not even getting paid because he's still having to work. So they're milking it out of him. Those are just dealings that you get into and deal with. Now, here's an easy example of some things that we get into when dealing with our just dealings. Warn them that are unruly. Comfort the feeble-minded. Support the weak. And be patient toward all men. See that none render evil for evil unto any man, but ever follow that which is good, both among yourselves and to all men. Rejoice evermore. Pray without ceasing. And in everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. And in Micah chapter 6, I think I noted it down here, he says, what is good and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with thy God. So we've got all of the presence of our lines of how we can deal justly with somebody. This is biblical reference back to what we're learning in the covenant. But no rendering evil for evil. So, if one flips their head with the 2x4, then he can't do right by swinging it around the other way and letting it get a hold of somebody else. That's not how this works when we're doing just dealings. And we're going to look at some more here in just a moment. What about, okay, let's do Psalms 18:25. What does it tell us?
With the merciful, thou wilt shew thyself merciful. With the upright man, thou wilt shew thyself upright.
Okay. What about Psalms 99?
King's strength also loveth judgment. Thou doest establish equity. Thou executest judgment and righteousness in Jacob.
And what about Psalms 97 too?
Clouds of darkness are round about him. Righteousness and judgment are the habitation of his throne.
So, like mercy, justice is something that God expects to find growing in us. Why? Why does he expect to find that justice is something that God expects to find in us? Why would he expect that out of us?
Supposed to be Christ-like, people.
Okay. And he is a,
Example.
no, the Bible says that he is a something God,
What?
a just God. Well, if God is just and we are to be imitators of his image, then we should also learn to do things with justice. Now, it also in these 3 verses of Psalms talks about that him being the judge of all the earth, as it says, to do what is just. Now you think about the fact that righteousness and justice are the foundation of God's throne. The what shall live by faith. What does it say that the what shall live by faith? The just shall live by faith. You think about all of the presence and where we're at, that God shows mercy, love, and justice. Justice. If you're justified, which we are, if you're saved and you're justified, then you have been justified because of what? What justified you to be able to be a Christian?
Love of Jesus.
Okay?
Grace.
Yeah. All the attributes of his works, of his plan, has justified you by you getting forgiveness of your sins, believing in the resurrection, raising the 3rd day. All of these points and parts the Bible teaches us, but just God is an attribute that we should be mirroring and mimicking. And one of the things that we know so well in James is that pure religion and undefiled before God and Father is this. What does it say? To visit the fatherless and widows in their affliction. Then the next one. And to keep himself unspotted from the world. Unspotted from the world. When we look at a lot of things that come to us in all of our dealings in life, and you think about what all you get into in life that you have to deal with, we call dealings. We're not perfect humans, and we sure don't do everything right, and we don't do things without making some mistakes sometimes of how we choose to deal with others. But do you think they're going to forget that? No, they're not going to forget that. And a lot of times it takes one time of not being just with someone and being rightful with someone in all situations before we get ourselves into a problem that there is no more trusting, no more dealing with us. Here's an example. Another thing about being just in the dealings. If there's come to your assembly a man with a gold ring and goodly apparel, and there come also a poor man in vile raiment, and you have respect to him that weareth the gay clothing, and say unto him, Sit thou here in a good place, and say to the poor, Stand thou here, or sit here under my footstool. Are you not then partial in yourselves, and are becoming judges of evil thoughts? Hearken, my beloved brethren, hath not God chosen the poor of this world rich in faith, and heirs of the kingdom which he hath promised to them that love him? Here we see that we've got one in a gold ring, good clothes, comes walking in. They say, hey, sit down with us, eat. And then another one comes in. He looks like he's homeless, ain't got hardly nothing to wear, bare feet. And they say, you go over and sit over there. Or come here and sit under me. Just sit on the footstool. Now, when we've done that, you think about the fact that here we go into the mindset of how people dissimulate who someone is because of what they see. Right? If you see somebody that's dirty, no hardly nothing to wear, they're pushing a buggy around full of stuff, what do you immediately assume? Homeless. Okay. With homelessness, then they automatically now public society takes into them people looting, stealing, ransacking people's places, doing all this stuff, trying to find money, food, whatever they're trying to get. That's an immediate distinguishment. And you know how that changes your mindset of whether or not you're going to help somebody. If someone comes up to you in the parking lot at Walmart or the grocery store and says, would you give me some money? I'd like to be able to buy something to eat. Do we not, first thought come to our mind is, what are we looking at? Have we got somebody standing here trying to take our money and they're going to buy something else with it or buy drugs or do whatever with it they shouldn't do? Or do we have somebody that is maybe being honest and they're seemingly legit? You see people in Middlesboro pretty regularly around Walmart sitting there like there's a man and a woman and a child sitting on the corner behind Crystal or Taco Bell with a sign, wasn't it? They were sitting there and they were wanting money to support their family. And that's what they were standing there doing, was trying to get money to support their family. They looked like they were all wearing nice clothes, didn't seem to be badly dressed or anything. Nothing looked out of place. There's people that will look at those people and say, they don't need it. He's got nice shoes on, they're clean. He don't need that, he's got new clothes on. See how quickly we are to assume everything. Instead of learning, and I'm not saying this about that man, woman, and child that we seen over there the other day, but what if you then found out a little while later when your neighbor comes over and says, hey, I seen a man, a woman, and a child today over at Crystal's. You say, yeah, I seen them too. And then he says, well, I went up to them and asked them what they needed help with, and they told me their house burnt last night and they ain't got a thing. Man, what distinction we just did in our dealings, our just dealings with how we've dealt with someone and how we've chose to manage to do things with people. So a lot of things in our dealings is done, I think, sometimes out of habit, not so much out of us just really looking into an instinct in things. What about being faithful in our engagements? Let's say that Paul, I want to mention this, Paul started talking to people at a time in the Bible, and I'll get to it in a minute, but Paul started talking to people in the time when they were just scatterbraining everywhere. I mean, the people in the church, out of the church, everybody was just getting so scattered with everything. The churches were going crazy with the stuff they had coming in and going on and letting go on, and the world coming in and going out. It became a point to where you almost couldn't distinguish the church and the world. Well, and now, have we not almost got right back to that? We've almost got back to a point it's hard to distinguish sometimes the differences between the world and the church. The first thing, I pulled the verses here, about keeping or being faithful in our engagements. Now, here's one of the things that comes to you first. This is a command that comes that if you're making a vow or pledge to the Lord, then you're not supposed to be, you must not break your word. He shall not break his word. He shall do according to all that proceedeth out of his mouth. Well, how many people right now are church members? Let's just say that. How many church members do you think right now knows that verse? I might challenge Roger Sunday morning. Ginger was. You know it? You give me signs. It's zero. I got you now. I might challenge Roger Sunday morning Sunday school just to get up and read that verse and just see if anybody's ever heard it before. None of y'all say nothing about it. Okay. So, but you think about the fact, the truth about, one of the things that Jesus said on the Sermon on the Mount, and it just come to my mind when he was teaching against not using deceptive speech and all the oaths or validating yourself, not to be doing none of that. He told them that they were to practice straightforward. And what did he tell them to do? To let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Be faithful in what you engage in. Okay. How many people understands that the Bible teaches that if you speak it and vow to do it or swear to it, that you're not to break your word, you're to do every bit of it. Every bit of it.
It's one's prerogative though, to change your mind.
Woman's prerogative to change her mind.
Oh,
Oh, that's rough. Oh, Lord have mercy.
Where's that at in the Bible?
All right. Take that up with Tony and let her do that. That'd be your all's just dealings. But yeah. But
Or give a
Yeah.
chapter.
Yeah.
But how hard is it today? And let's just put ourselves in our own position here. How many people right now do you don't take for their word? How many people tell you something you don't take them for their word? I'll believe it when I see it. How much of that do you practice with people? Quite a bit. Honestly, there's people that I have honestly seen that when they showed up for works, when I believe they'd be there. But it wouldn't shock me if they wasn't there at all, or didn't come back, or whatever the case was. Same thing with other positions in our lives that we've got to where that people don't keep their word. Their yes is not a yes, their no is not a no. They should just start not saying nothing at all and not respond. It'd be safer for them. But just looking at it under a covenant oath statement, when you join the church under covenant, you've agreed to these things. You've agreed to biblical standards. How many of people have kept their word on being faithful in their engagements?
not many.
Thin line, very thin line, I feel like. I've seen people how many people do we know right now that 20 years ago was at church every Sunday? And nothing's really changed. They just don't go.
World changed.
Yeah. But even in their lives, they still work the same job. They still live in the same house. Their family's all the same. Same as it was 20 years ago when they went to church, and now they don't go. There's not a reminder to people about keeping their words. What about the fact of honoring commitments? Honoring commitments, even when it's not very fun, it's hard times. In whose eyes a vile person is condemned, but he honoreth them that fear the Lord. And he that sweareth to his own hurt and changeth not. The righteous person, and David wrote in this part of the Psalms, the righteous person that keeps their promises and their commitments, even if it causes them inconvenience or harm. That's the praise to the righteous person that continues to stand on what they promised. Stand on what they promised they would do, the word that they said they would keep, whatever that may be. They stand on that. He praises them when they do that, even when it causes them harm or inconvenience. Here's another one. He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much. So here's the trustworthiness. If people are trustworthy in the small, everyday things, that automatically reflects their character for larger responsibilities. If people are going to lie about little things, what are they going to do about the big things? That's honesty. That's it. That's part of being faithful in our engagements. Here's another one. Avoiding rash vows. When thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it, for he hath no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou hast vowed. Better is it that thou shouldest not vow than that thou shouldest vow and not pay. Those quick commitments that people jump up to do or make a vow is worse than those that make no promise that they'll never fail to fulfill. We've got a lot of people in today's world. Have you ever had an event you're having, people say, I'll be there, I'll help do this. 10 minutes after starting time, they're not there. or then you don't see them for a week or two. A lot of things come back with efforts and things that we're doing, and all the things that we're doing. Being exemplary in our deportment. Now, here's a dandy. How many of y'all strive to be this? Huh? No, not everybody tries to be a good employee. Not everybody tries to be a good employee. Some's trying to take others out. But you think about the fact that how much people, some try to be the model employee. Let me put it that way. Some people will try to do it all, just wide open, perfect, do as much as they can. They want all the recognition, awards, so on and so forth. Everybody's striving to be a good employee, and being just in our dealings, and then going into being exemplary in our deportment. This is back to our honest wage and honest living, and the Bible talks about this. And the first thing that I have found that came to my mind when I got to looking at this is salvation is not something that you can put down when you get to work and then pick it back up when you come home. And even people that's under a lot of work stress or people put to their limits, that's when we're proving our quality. When you're really on strain on the edge, that's when we're proving our quality. And one of the things that comes about being exemplary in our deportment is about honest work. Faithful in the service that we promise others. Well, if you go to take a job, you're telling that employer, I'm going to do this job. I'm going to do my job requirements. I'm going to be faithful to do what I've promised to do, and I'm going to do my job to meet the demands of what this job requires. People become more interested in one thing, and I thought about this because we get to wearing too many hats. We're getting too busy. We have got so much going on in our lives that we can't see right or left, up or down. If you've ever been in one of them times that you've got so much running through your mind, you're trying to get caught up on things you need to do and all the stuff coming up, that you're just in a whirlwind and it's like a blur. You can't seem to get anything done. We're wearing so many hats and nowadays going on of what all we're doing. We've gotten so busy. But you know what's interesting to me, and I thought about this, is that the people watching you in the covenant teaching, the Bible teaching, and being just in our dealings, faithful in our engagements, and then even going on to being exemplary in our deportment. One of the things that I learned not long ago in a conversation with someone that told me, and it was part of his testimony, but he was telling me a very interesting part that came with something I hadn't really ever thought of. And this is what he said. He said that people really ain't looking to see what salvation has to offer and what it affects us in the church. People's not really looking for that. And I said, okay. And I'm just listening to him. And he said, what people are looking for is what salvation has to offer in their everyday trials. What's it going to do for me in what I'm dealing with, what I'm facing every day in my life? What's it going to do for me? That's what they're interested in knowing, is that salvation has to offer in their everyday life. And so our attitude toward our job, our attitude toward work, and that's a very challenging thing sometimes, is one of the things that we go into. If you do a job that you're called into or do good work at or do something with, and your name gets out, people's going to call you and ask you if you'll come do that for them. Roger and Robert build houses. How do you all get customers? You don't have a billboard? I thought you was going to put your heads up there somewhere on the billboard.
Don't even have it on our
News,
truck.
you don't even have it on the truck? No newspaper ads, Facebook, you got no advertising. So all of your work is nothing but by word of mouth. How much of a bad attitude while they're working on building somebody's house would turn you off from having them come to yours?
Bad attitude.
Yeah. How quick would that turn you off from asking them to come to work on your house? Quickly. You'd be back to that just dealings, and you'd be evaluating that. But salvation in itself and the change that God makes in us transforms us, let me say. When we talk about being exemplary in our deployment, not just being a good employee at our job, not just being good at what we do, God calls us to make an honest living, honest work. Let me put it that way. There's been many times and many days that people, okay, I'll give you an example. Kim's Collinsworth was, I think, down at River, is it Side, where he used to be? He was pastor there when him and Travis Chumley was at the grocery store over there, wasn't they? In Tazewell. And they brought in alcohol to sale, if I remember correctly, years ago. And those two, Travis Chumley, Blair's Creek, and Kim at that time was down at Riverside. They were put on the line because they're pastoring a church, and they're going to be managers. I think they were management or something up the ladder of a store that's going to sell liquor and alcohol. And they both left their job and went into something else and quit because they couldn't uphold saying, I vowed an oath to the covenant. The covenant says that you shall not do what about alcohol? What does it say? What does it say about it?
Sell.
Yeah, either one. Make it or sell it. They had done made their vow. They had done oath to God, church, everything. They weren't going to do that. And they had to leave their jobs and quit that. Does that not create an image in people's minds of if they believe that strongly about what they believe in, that they're going to walk away and quit their job because they won't have it. They won't stand for it. And they won't do it. That had to be something to get some attention. Somebody paid attention to that. See, that's the opening of the door in our honest work and our deployment that we do. Everything that we go for in everyday life, salvation that people are looking for and the way that they're evaluating it is what does it have to offer in their everyday trials? Do you know that right now in modern day times, most of all of our people, at least over the teenage years, have no conceptible thought about dying and go to hell? If you bring up salvation, if you talk about being saved, going to hell is not the key factor for them. That is not even of their interest or concern. You know what their interest and concern is? How's it going to help me deal with what I'm doing? How's it going to help me deal with my problems? How is it going to help me with this? That's their view, their straight line, one-sided view. That's how they see everything. They don't see that there's an end coming somewhere we don't know. They don't see the point could be any time just ahead. They've seen anything. They're looking to see exactly what it has to offer. If you're at work, back to the work, if you're at work and no matter what comes your way, and I've had a lot of people that I've even got some I work with, this comes to fact that no matter what somebody does to them, you don't see them react. I've got a couple at work that, no matter how bad the patients treat them, how bad the people call and complain on them, they don't act any different than they do on an everyday work day. They don't flare up and get mad and act out. They don't say nothing back to the people when they start causing problems, and other people working with them notice that quickly, and then it becomes catching, and the other ones stop responding to things. So our ways and the things that we do that follow. Here's one thing I like. Paul knew that you can't form character in people that won't work, and that you study to be quiet and to do your own business and to work with your own hands as we commanded you, that you may walk honestly toward them that are without, and that you may have lack of nothing. I always like the fact that Paul knew it, that you couldn't form no character in people that won't work. Do you know people that just won't work? You know that? I know people that can get top paying jobs. I've got one I know that worked 2 railroad jobs and got some big position in UPS. He's never worked one more than 6 months. He's less than 40 years old. He won't work that long. That's long enough. He don't stick. Paul knew that you can't form character in the people that will not work. Here's another one. Even when we were with you, this we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. Let's put that on something. Put that on a billboard with your all's advertisement. This we commanded you, that if any would not work, neither should he eat. For we hear that there are some which walk among you disorderly, working not at all, but are busybodies. Now them that are such we command and exhort by our Lord Jesus Christ, that with quietness they work and eat their own bread. But ye, brethren, be not weary in well doing. We had a time that Paul started talking about in this particular time, that some people started believing that the Lord was coming so quickly that there was no point in working or, getting money to live and buy food. There was no point in making a living because the Lord was going to come back so fast that they could just go bum and borrow off of the others that were working and buying bread and eating and surviving. They could just go bum off of them because they weren't going to need any of that anymore when the Lord come back so quick either. And all the point coming down to the wire, and I always loved it, that he come into telling them that if any would not work, neither should he eat. Here's something I pulled about exemplary deportment. He told Paul told Timothy to set an example. And everything that you do, you set the example. How you love people, how you talk to them, everything you do, you set the example. And then again, we're also to be the imitators. We're to be Christ-like in his image. Then we get into being honest in all of our dealings, even going into more of the book of James about avoiding things. Shining our light. Good behavior serves as a beacon, encouraging others to see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. If you broke those down specifically, here's your speech. Walk in wisdom toward them that are without, redeeming the time. Let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer every man. Then your humility. This one part of Philippians calls the believers to adopt the humble mindset of Christ and prioritizing the needs of others. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. And then the last part is a very common verse in Philippians 4 and 8. You all know this one. Whatever is honest, whatever is just, whatsoever things are pure, lovely, of good report, if there be any virtue and if there be any praise, you're to do what? Think on these things. And one of the things that I see is that this is what we're to think on and do, practice and do in everything that we live. In one verse, I'll ask anybody in here if you can quote to me Romans 12:1. Romans 12:1. Anybody quote that to me?
I beseech you, brethren, by the mercies of God, present your body a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is just your reason.
Presenting your bodies as a living sacrifice, being just in your dealings, faithful in your engagements, exemplary in your deportment. I always say, we'll go back to the famous bracelet. Put yourself in the mindset before you act, before you speak, before you do anything. You better examine the situation enough to say, how would God handle this? If Jesus was sitting right here, right now, how would he handle it? We don't have to spare any words of correction. I'm going to say that very plainly, that we don't have to be sparing. If the Bible teaches plainly against something, we're allowed to do the same. That's what I believe. If you have someone that's giving you a lot of grief and problems that are not living by the Bible, you're allowed to show that to them. This is how I live. This is why. This is what says that you're not doing right. That's what I believe. But presenting ourselves in all of the parts, especially what we're looking at tonight in the covenant, we've got a very hard line of what we agreed to. but people have shaken a lot of it off and not holding their part of the vow, the promise that they've made. And we're going to go through more as we look through in the next few weeks, some more things that cuts out a lot of things that people in the world love to do. And sometimes I think it just gets so catching that we find church members easily involved in a lot of things that the world does. But how many times can you go back and say, I got mad and shouldn't have done that? I got mad and should have thought about it before I acted. You know, I had a friend of mine, he got real angry at something one time with a family member. And I asked him what he was going to do. And he said, I'm going to cool down for a little while. He said, and when I can go and peacefully talk to him without getting mad, that's when I'm going to go talk to him. And he did. He waited a while.
How long?
Huh? A couple months, I think it was. I think it was a couple months before he went. But he did. He waited. And the result was much better, I'm sure, than what it would have been if he'd have jumped and went to him. But how much we deal with people is all the reflected image of the church. Everything we're doing outside these four walls, and the reason, one of the reasons I use work is because a lot of people, that's the majority of their time spent outside of home or family. But if we're not faithful to our responsibilities as a church member, if we're not upholding our promise and vow that we made to the church, how does, or even at work, if we're not upholding and doing our jobs, people see you just sitting over in the corner milking the clock for a while, you know, that's not being considered honest. How in the world do we think that they're seeing any qualities of something they think is going to help them? That's always the question asked, is how do they see that, and how is that going to help them in their view? Anybody got anything tonight? Anybody?
I think that's the reason why a lot of people ain't going to church, not going to church anymore as much. That's the biggest question. Well, what's the church gonna do for me?
Mhm.
What's the church got for my family?
Right. That's right.
Fellas, I was talking to you the other day, you said, he knew this one guy that was well educated. He was, I couldn't remember if he was a lawyer or what he was, but he didn't want to do that. He wanted to sit at Walmart or a store someplace and make his little trinkets. Like somebody come, and some people just walk up and hand him $100. Just because he did it. He didn't need it. He had plenty of money. But why would a person get credit for something like that? When he should be doing what he was supposed to do with this, maybe what he was taught.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Very questionable behavior of a lot of people. Anybody else got anything tonight? I can say that people are very quick to get mad and angry and lash out. If you watch anything public related, anything going on around us, people get heated so fast and they jump so fast to do anything. And most of the time I have found that a lot of people, when they're mad and they're acting out, they don't even know the whole story. Most of them don't even know the whole truth, and they're already acting on it. They're jumping to some tidbit of information or some little clue they've got, and they've ran with it. They're mad and far, and they're wound up tight, and they're going off on everything. And the actual fact of the matter is they've not even looked into it. And you can call it, here's what I like about the fact in our local area, this is not like Knoxville and other places, but here, if you had a meeting, town hall meeting, and something they're trying to do in the town nobody agreed with, and you have a town hall meeting and everybody goes, and you know all these people start speaking out against it, you know how they're going to identify you? Huh? That's Rick. He goes to Indian Creek. That's the first thing you'll hear. That's the first thing you'll hear. Oh, I know them. They go over to so-and-so church. You'll not hear no other identifier. That's exactly where it'll go. That's how quick your dealings has tied you back to the family or back to the church. It's just instantly one thing, one little thing. And that's one of the things about being image bearers, and I always look at it that way too, being image bearers is that, you know, if you are all they see, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, if you are all that they ever see, are they seeing anything that has got their attention enough to realize that there is something more they don't have, something that it definitely creates you to be a very different person than they are? All these things that detail out that they're watching and examining should be the story that they're reading right off of us while we're working whatever we're doing. But it calls us back to our covenant of being just in our dealings, faithful in our engagements, exemplar in our deportment. You've seen people that's not been to church in a while, and you see them out in public, and you say, "Yeah, you need to come back." I'll tell you what, I'll be there Sunday. You see them? No. But I do know this. This is one thing I'll tell you to keep you from wanting to do anything like it, because God don't forget that. If you promised it, He does not forget that. I'd be very careful what I promise and vow, but He don't forget that. And I always keep that in the back of my mind. He knows. He remembers. It's not so great like people might want to make it look like. They may look like they're so happy and life is grand outside these walls, and they've not been to church in however long. It's not so. It's not so. The face picture is not so. But God knows and remembers. He remembers. Anybody else got anything?
I think people so quick to judge anymore.
Oh, yes.
No matter what you say, they're ready to judge it
Mm-hmm.
on anything.
Yeah. I don't know if y'all been in church services or not. I've been in a couple where a man and woman will have a baby, and they'll want to have a dedication service. Y'all ever been in one dedication? They'll want to dedicate it. And I've just really thought in my mind about examining them down and just ask them a few questions about what are they dedicating. Because in 20 years, 18 years, 16 years, whatever, when the kid's that age, are they still holding what they dedicated that they would follow and do? When they did that meant, because the Lord remembers it. He knows. You just think about all the practice things people do. They do it so comfortably, so easily. We just move so fluently in our comfort zone. But God remembers that. He knows exactly what we vowed. And I see these dedication services. I seen one the other day where people were dedicating their little baby to God and wanted the godly parents to raise it and so on and so forth. Do they remember that 10 years later? Does that come back to mind at any point in time after they've done that?
Some think doing that, the kid's safe, rest of his life.
Some beliefs do that. Yeah, that's true. Very true. Anybody else got anything?
Some people, majority of people take wedding vows that way.
Mhm.
They don't realize what kind of vows they're stepping into.
No.
Before God, like we stood one time before. It's now, it's no more than paper chip.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I mean, that's the, they stand before a preacher and give that vow.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if they ever do think it.
Yep.
One thing about it, God is able to forgive them no matter what. In
Mhm.
a situation like that,
Mm-hmm.
if they confess their sin before Him,
Mm-hmm.
just to forgive them, even in a vow, God's able to still forgive a person for that reason.
Yep.
Sometimes we want to vow.
You can't keep. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some thinks going to church that they're safe because they go to church.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Anybody else?